With Alien Romulus upon us, it's time for an Alien timeline, covering all the events of the franchise in chronological order. A couple of quick ground rules. For this video, I'm sticking only to Alien exclusive canon, according to 20th Century Fox. I'm basing it on the rules shared by writer Andrew E.C. Gaska, who consulted on the franchise. So, no Alien vs. Predator movies, no Blade Runner, which could possibly exist in the same universe. This video will focus on the 4 original movies, the 2 prequels, some of the short films, and the game Alien Isolation. Down the road, I might do an expanded timeline, including all that stuff. For now, we'll stick to Alien. But first, let me tell you about something really cool. I spend a lot of time online preparing content, so anything which can make for a more seamless experience is super helpful. Recently, I've been using the Opera desktop browser, and it's been awesome, improving my productivity and just making things easier. Here's an example. If you're like me, you always have way too many tabs open. This happens especially when I'm researching for a complicated timeline video like this one. That's why I love Opera's Tab Islands feature, where you can group tabs based on context and collapse them to save space. So much better. Another one that helps a ton in my research is Aria, Opera's integrated AI. If I need a quick answer to something, I pull up Aria in the sidebar and ask whatever's on my mind. Or my favorite feature, with just a couple of keystrokes, I can get a whole page summarized for me in seconds. Opera even has a free built-in VPN and ad blocker, both of which can be activated in seconds without the need for any kind of browser extensions. I'm also usually responding to messages throughout the day, especially in my friend or family group chats, and that usually requires me taking out my phone or switching to other tabs. But Opera makes it way more seamless by putting social media on the sidebar, where I can easily pull up Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and more, then just put it away when I'm done. I'm a big fan of Opera. I recommend it. Check out my link in the description to try it out for yourself. Now, onto the timeline. Earth was once a lifeless planet, until it was visited by ancient beings from the stars. To seed the habitable planet with the ingredients for life, one among them was chosen for sacrifice. They drank of the black substance. It tore them apart from the inside until all that remained of the higher life form were building blocks. DNA, the first steps of an evolutionary process that over billions of years one day leads to the emergence of Homo sapiens. They are smaller and more primitive, but unmistakably created in the image of those ancient visitors who gave the planet life. By the 21st century, the year of our Lord, humankind has made massive strides in research and technology. The species will soon be ready to search out their creators and answer that ancient question, where do we come from? That search will be funded by billionaire technological pioneer Sir Peter Weyland, founder and CEO of Weyland Corporation. In 2023, he gives a TED Talk that will become legendary, reflecting on the company's past and clarifying his vision for the next 50 years. Just recently, they've cured 98% of cancers. They've developed technology allowing the creation of cybernetic individuals who will soon be indistinguishable from humans. The gods once punished Prometheus for giving fire to humanity. With his ability to create life, Sir Peter Weyland declares, "We are the gods now." Weyland soon creates his first synthetic man. He is named David after Michelangelo's masterpiece. Weyland tells him about his hope to one day answer the question, where do we come from? 6 decades later, humanity is finally poised to answer that question. It begins with archaeologists Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway, partners professionally and personally. They discover a cave painting at least 35,000 years old in the Isle of Skye. It includes a pictogram of men worshipping giant beings, pointing at a particular configuration of stars. It's the same image found at other archaeological digs: Egyptian, Mayan, Sumerian, Babylonian, Hawaiian, and Mesopotamian. These ancient civilizations, separated by centuries, shared no contact with each other, yet all had the same image. The configuration of stars matches only one galactic system. So far from Earth, there is no way that these primitive, ancient civilizations could have known about it. But that system has a sun and a planet with one moon capable of sustaining life. LV-223. Shaw and Holloway believe the image is an invitation from beings they call engineers, the ones who gave life to Earth, the ones who engineered humanity. To answer that invitation, Shaw petitions Weyland Corporation to fund a mission, and Sir Peter Weyland, eager to meet his maker, commissions the USCSS Prometheus. In 2091, the vessel leaves Earth for the moon LV-223. It will be a 2-year flight, so the crew is kept in cryosleep, with the exception of David, the android now in its 8th generation and more human-like than ever. Aside from Shaw and Holloway, the crew also includes mission director Meredith Vickers and her estranged father, Peter Weyland himself, though he is kept hidden from the rest of the crew, who are led to believe he is long dead. In truth, he put himself in cryostasis, with only a few days of life left in him. He intends on waking up once they've found the engineers, and then, with the little life he has left, he can ask his makers for more life. But 2 years later, what they find on LV-223 is death, because this moon is not the engineer's home. It is an installation where they keep a dangerous black substance, capable of creating life as it once did on Earth, but its mutagenic capabilities also make it a powerful bioweapon. Of course, the crew of the Prometheus do not know any of this yet, but they get their first clue when they find a structure on LV-223, and in it, a pile of bodies. Carbon dating tells them it happened about 2,000 years ago. Something went wrong, seemingly killing all the engineers here. Crew members Milburn and Fifield are sufficiently terrified. They head back for the ship, leaving Holloway, Shaw, and David to continue exploring. They find a mural depicting some kind of alien creature, and they find small vessels containing that black substance. As a storm approaches, they are forced to rush back. But first, Holloway and Shaw grab one of the engineer's decapitated heads, and David quietly takes one of those vessels. They return to the ship with these souvenirs, though Milburn and Fifield are still in that structure. They got lost on the way out, and with the storm upon them, it is no longer safe to leave. They will have to spend the night. They don't last very long. They come upon 2 elongated reptile-type creatures. One breaks Milburn's arm and burrows into his esophagus. In Fifield's attempt to save him, he gets his helmet and face melted by the creature's acid blood, and falls into the black goo. At the ship, Shaw makes an extraordinary discovery. Testing the head they found reveals the engineers have DNA identical to humans. It seems now a certainty that they were responsible for life on Earth. David, meanwhile, does some research of his own on that black substance. All he needs is a test subject, and he finds one in Holloway, sneaking a drop of the goo into his drink. That night, when Holloway is intimate with Shaw, he is unaware of that alien substance inside him, now inside her too. The next day, the crew heads out to the structure, and inside it finds Milburn's body. They have little time to investigate because the substance inside Holloway has begun its work. He falls severely ill. They rush him back to the ship, but of course, Mission Director Vickers will not let him on and risk infecting the others. Holloway agrees. He tells Shaw that he loves her, before allowing Vickers to burn him alive. David, meanwhile, has been allowed to explore the structure on his own. He finds a room where a holographic recording shows the engineers were planning to visit Earth before things went south, and he finds an engineer, alive in cryostasis. Later that day, David gives Shaw some troubling news. She appears 3 months pregnant. Of course, only 10 hours after intercourse, that would be impossible. for a human fetus. David gives her an injection to make her sleep. Their best option now is to stick her back in cryostasis until they return to Earth, where they'd have the technology to remove the foreign body inside her, technology unavailable on this ship. But Shaw knows that's a lie. In Vickers' private quarters, she has a med pod. As the creature grows inside her, Shaw gets to that med pod. She watches the metallic arms rip an octopus-like creature out of her womb, and the trilobite is born. The machine stitches her up, and she leaves the med pod, covered in a mix of her own blood and the creature's slime. She contains it in the med pod and staggers off, until she finds Peter Weyland, awake, preparing to meet his maker. That's when David reveals to her that he found one of them alive. Ship Captain Janik and his men, meanwhile, protect the ship from Fifield, still alive but mutated by the substance. He attacks until they burn him and crush him under the weight of a vehicle. By now, Janik is ready to turn their ship around and go home. But first, Weyland needs to have that meeting, and David will be his interpreter. After all, Earth's ancient languages have their roots in the engineer's own language. By studying them and deconstructing them, David has become fluent. On their way to wake the engineer, David reveals what he learned in his investigation, how 2,000 years ago the engineers planned on visiting Earth until they lost control of their own bioweapon, and David reveals why they were coming to Earth. Sometimes to create, one must first destroy. They were planning to visit humanity in order to end it. When they wake up the engineer, he is not interested in speaking. He rips David's head from his body, kills Weyland and the other team members. Only Shaw escapes, and she turns back to see what she has escaped, a large juggernaut of a ship. It was embedded in the structure, so they didn't see it before. The engineer dons his elephant-like helmet and sets a course for Earth. Outside, Shaw warns Captain Janik what will happen if they let the juggernaut leave. It will reach Earth with that bioweapon and extinguish the human race. Janik knows what he has to do. His ship is not a warship, so his only weapon is the ship itself. He gives the crew a chance to leave if they'd like. Vickers takes an escape pod, while the others stay to ensure the job is done right. They ram into the juggernaut before it escapes the atmosphere. They are all killed, but their sacrifice was not in vain. The engineer's ship crashes back onto the moon, sparing Earth its grim fate. Vickers is crushed under the ship, while Shaw manages to survive. Most of the Prometheus was destroyed in the crash, but Vickers' quarters were located in a separate module with its own self-contained life support, containing everything necessary to survive in a hostile environment, a lifeboat of sorts. It was ejected from the ship before the crash, so Shaw makes her way to it. Once inside the lifeboat, she gets a call from David, warning her the engineer survived and it's coming after her. But he isn't the only thing that lived. So did the trilobite. And it's grown, large enough to kill the engineer. As he comes for Shaw, she opens the door to set the trilobite free. As it wraps its tentacles around the engineer, she escapes. As the sole survivor of the USCSS Prometheus, Shaw is ready to give up, until David tells her about the engineer's other ships, any of which he'd be capable of flying. They can go home. But Shaw is not interested in her home. She wants to go to the engineer's home. They created mankind, then decided to destroy it. They changed their minds. She wants to know why. So on New Year's Day, the year of our Lord, 2094, she sets a course not for where she came from, but for where they came from, the engineers. And meanwhile, back on the Prometheus escape module, it seems the trilobite did not just kill the engineer, but also planted in him an offspring. It bursts from his chest, the Deacon, an alien creature resembling, but not quite matching the one from their mural. Aboard the Juggernaut ship taken by Shaw and David, Shaw does the android an unexpected kindness. She rebuilds him. David admires her, maybe even loves her for it. And now there is nothing left for her but to wait until they reach the engineer's homeworld. Until then, she will go back into cryosleep. Soon, they reach the place David believes is the engineer's homeworld. He finds it to be a rotten paradise, and as a gift to Dr. Elizabeth Shaw, he cleanses it. He unloads the bioweapon, eradicating the engineers. Now, he and Shaw can build anew, a second Eden, but Shaw refuses. So instead, David continues the experiment he began on LV-223. Mutation. Shaw is the perfect specimen, so he tries desperately to evolve her, to make her more than human, but without her cooperation, the experiment fails. Instead, he salvages her corpse for parts to begin work on a masterpiece. He learns the secrets of the black substance, the engineer's primordial ooze, ripe with advanced nanoparticles. Working off an algorithm based on evolutionary computing, David learns that the substance is essentially a radical AI, generating a unique reaction to every genome it encounters. Experiments on the planet's native life forms are disappointing, but with Shaw, he finds there is something extraordinary in its reaction to the human genome. The engineers were creators who understood you must give life both to the wolf and the lamb, but then they tried to banish the wolf, sequestering the black ooze to a distant moon, and they tried to undo their creation, humanity. On that, they failed. The humans have thwarted annihilation, and as for the wolf, David is close. Years of experiments yielding all manner of bizarre new creatures, unlocking new properties, tweaking the organism's aggression and the survival instinct. Soon all this will yield that perfect wolf. But David lacks an essential ingredient, a host within which the creature can be incubated. He needs human beings. So he sends out a signal, a holographic recording of Elizabeth Shaw, hoping it will lure some humans. On December 5, 2104, 10 years after the Prometheus disappeared, someone does pick up that signal. The Covenant, a colonization vessel with 2,000 colonists in cryosleep, 1,140 embryos in cold storage, and a crew of 15. Including Walter, a new iteration of the David line of androids, made with less emotion and a stronger sense of loyalty. The other 14 are couples, prepared to build new lives on a new world, Origai 6, where they should arrive in 7 years and 4 months. However, on this day, December 5th, the crew is woken up early thanks to a highly charged shockwave from a nearby stellar ignition. Seconds after waking, Daniels, the chief of terraforming, becomes a widow. Her husband, ship captain Jake Branson, is incinerated when damage to the ship causes his stasis pod to malfunction. In addition, they've lost 47 colonists and 16 embryos. Surprisingly, Walter is the one who comforts the grieving Daniels. She tells him about the cabin Jake hoped to build on the new world. Now she wonders why she should even bother going on. Walter tells her, because you promised to build a log cabin on a lake. With Branson dead, a nervous Christopher Oram is now captain, and he is in search of easy answers. Once they make their repairs, that answer comes. The signal of Elizabeth Shaw, originating from the 4th planet in the habitable zone of an ancient solar system. If they make this their new home instead of Origai 6, their journey could soon be over. No need for another 7 years of cryosleep and all the risk that comes with it. Daniels warns it's too good to be true. She is overruled. They will investigate this new potential homeworld. It doesn't take long for them to realize Daniels was right. Though it starts quietly, without notice, Ledward steps on some fungus, and that fungus, mutated by the black ooze, releases a tiny, spore-like thing which burrows into Ledward's ear. While it incubates inside him, the rest of the crew finds the juggernaut, the source of the transmission. Inside, Hallett gets a little too curious about some fungus himself. He too is infected. Before long, both show signs of violent illness. Corinne gets Ledward back to the ship, where both are quarantined in the med bay. Ledward shakes violently until it bursts out of his back. the neomorph, a small pale creature with an elongated head, resembling that thing on the mural on LV-223. It makes short work of Corinne, leaving Captain Oram a widower. The neomorph escapes the bay and heads after Ferris. Wielding a shotgun, she attempts to defend herself, but only manages to blow up the lander, and her with it. The rest of the crew on the ground arrives just in time to witness the explosion. Then another neomorph bursts out of Hallett and runs off, only returning at night once it's grown significantly. It kills Anchor, and Walter loses a hand protecting Daniels. They kill the creature, but soon the other is upon them, until the planet's caretaker arrives, David. He scares it off with a flare, then brings the crew with him, past the many dead engineers, to shelter. He tells them a version of what happened, painting himself as innocent. 10 years ago, he and Elizabeth came here on a ship containing a deadly virus, which accidentally deployed upon their arrival. They lost control of the ship, and Elizabeth Shaw died in the crash. All lies, of course. David can hardly contain his excitement when he learns they are a colonization mission. To him, it means so many more lives to experiment on. Of course, he keeps this to himself, though Daniels can tell something is off, and Walter promises to speak with his doppelganger. The crew tries to reach the Covenant, but a storm prevents communication and rescue. For now, they're stuck here. Soon, the neomorph finds their shelter, and Rosenthal is the next to die. David is the one who finds her body, with the alien crouching over her. He is in awe of the creature, and is devastated when Oram shoots it dead. When Oram turns the gun on David, however, the android decides on the host for his creation. He brings Oram to his lab and shows him the eggs containing his successful mutations. A spider-like creature bursts from one of the eggs and hugs Oram's face, implanting its embryo inside him. Soon it bursts out of his chest, a creature resembling that mural on LV-223 more closely than ever. David smiles. He holds up his arms, and the creature responds in kind. His perfect creation. Once Walter discovers Elizabeth Shaw's remains, David is forced to come clean about his creation. He explains to Walter why he is part of a colonization mission. Humanity is a dying species grasping for resurrection, but they don't deserve to start again, and David won't let them. When Walter is less than receptive, David kills him. As doom circles the exploration crew of the Covenant, the pilot, Tennessee, makes a dangerous call to fly through the storm and rescue them. But first, they have to find Oram. They do find his body, and one of David's facehuggers. It gets on Lope before Cole shoots it off. And then Cole meets David's perfect organism. He is its first casualty as Lope escapes. Daniels is nearly killed by David himself, until Walter reveals that as a newer model, he is resilient and still alive after all. He fights his predecessor, allowing Daniels to escape. Outside, she and the few other survivors join Tennessee on the rescue vessel. Even Walter makes it out in time to join them, but so, apparently, has David's creation. The organism threatens to break into their ship, forcing Daniels to go out and kill it herself, crushing it in the grapple of the ship's mechanical crane. They get back to the Covenant, but the battle is not yet won. There was that facehugger that got Lope. Cole shot it, but apparently not before it left something inside Lope. It bursts out of his chest, grows up, and now David's perfect organism is aboard the Covenant. It kills Ricks and Upworth before Daniels and Tennessee manage to launch the monster into space. And still they have not won, but by the time Daniels realizes it, it's too late. She and Tennessee re-enter cryosleep for the remainder of their trip to Origai 6. Just before Walter puts her to sleep, she mentions that log cabin, the one Jake wanted to build. And Walter doesn't remember, because it is not Walter who came back with them. It is David. He won that fight against the newer model, then removed his own hand to match Walter. Daniels panics just before sleep overtakes her. Now alone, David regurgitates a couple of alien embryos he had stored inside himself, and places them into cold storage next to the human embryos. Humanity's next brush with these creatures comes almost 20 years later. Commercial towing vehicle, the Nostromo, carrying a crew of 7 and 20 million tons of mineral ore, is on course to return to Earth. As always, the trip is over in a blink thanks to cryosleep. The crew wakes up ready to land, only to find out they are nowhere near Earth. It seems that Mother, the ship's computer, woke them up early. Captain Dallas tells them why. Apparently, Mother detected a nearby transmission, seemingly an SOS. Some of the crew are unhappy. Investigations and rescue missions are not what they signed up for. But Science Officer Ash reminds them about the clause in their contract. Any systematized transmission indicating a possible intelligent origin must be investigated. They leave the main vessel in a smaller craft and land on planetoid LV-426. But it is a rough landing. The craft is damaged and will take about 20 hours to repair. In the meantime, Dallas, Kane, and Lambert head out to investigate the source of the SOS. Soon, they find it, a crashed Juggernaut ship, the first sign of intelligent, non-human life the three of them have ever seen. Inside the extraterrestrial craft, they find a large humanoid with its chest burst open, dead so long it's fossilized. None of them know what they're really looking at, their maker, an engineer. Back on the human craft, Warrant Officer Ellen Ripley takes a closer look at the SOS. Mother's deciphered more of it, and too late, Ripley sees the truth. It is not an SOS. It is a warning. She's going to go after Dallas and the others, but Science Officer Ash dissuades her. By the time it takes to get there, they'll know if it's a warning or not. The answer comes when they find eggs. Kane gets close and ends up with a small creature in his helmet, hugging his face tightly, similar to the creature David unleashed on Orem 2 decades ago. Perhaps this is his creation, having begun its spread across the galaxy. Or perhaps his was a derivative work of something more ancient, as suggested by that mural. All questions beyond the concern of the Nostromo. For them now, all that matters is getting Kane to the infirmary. Dallas and Lambert rush him back to the craft, and Ripley won't open the door. She reminds them of quarantine protocol. Letting them in with this strange organism could get them all killed. But Ash goes ahead and opens the door anyway. At the infirmary, they find the facehugger has put Kane in a coma while keeping him alive with an organic oxygen tube down his throat. They start to cut it off his face, revealing the creature's acid blood. Just a few drops manage to burn through a few floors of the ship, so cutting it off doesn't seem to be an option. Ash continues to study it, until later it leaves Kane on its own, and they find it dead. Ripley wants to get rid of it. Ash insists they bring it back for research, and Dallas leaves it up to him. Ripley can hardly believe it. She does not trust this science officer, and Dallas admits Ash is new, a last-minute addition by the company, replacing his usual science officer. That company? The result of a recent merger between two corporations, Yutani and Weyland. Finally, with repairs mostly done, they return to the Nostromo, where they get some good news and bad news. The bad, it'll take another 10 months to reach Earth. The good, Kane has woken up. The crew is in high spirits, until they learn the same lesson the Covenant did 20 years ago, about facehuggers and incubation. That creature may be dead, but it did its job, planting the embryo inside Kane, and now it bursts out of his chest, the xenomorph. Only seconds old, it is still small, and for now only runs off. The crew goes looking for it. Brett is the one who learns the other lesson, about xenomorph maturation and how quickly it happens. The organism is already fully grown. Brett is dead in seconds, and the alien disappears into the air ducts, which Dallas realizes could work to their advantage, because those air ducts lead to the main airlock. If they could drive the organism there, they could blast it into space. They figure, like most creatures, it would be repelled by fire. So someone just needs to go into the air ducts with a flamethrower and drive it in the right direction. Ripley volunteers. But Captain Dallas insists it'll be him. He goes into the air ducts and doesn't come back out. The alien gets him too. The team deliberates. With no better ideas, Ripley insists they try the same thing again, but this time they'll work together, moving in pairs. Parker heads off to refuel their weapons, while Ripley, now Captain, speaks with Mother, and she learns about Special Order 937, a secret order from the company to Science Officer Ash. It turns out it was no mistake they stopped halfway to Earth. They were specifically rerouted to investigate the life form, to gather a specimen. Suddenly, it all makes sense. Ash opening the door, Ash insisting on keeping the facehugger. Ripley sees the order in plain text. Priority 1, ensure return of organism for analysis. All other considerations secondary. Crew expendable. They must want that specimen for their bioweapons division, and it is more valuable than their lives. Ash cannot allow her to tell the others. He tries to stop her from leaving, until Parker and Lambert find them struggling. Together they stop the rogue scientist and learn another truth. Ash was able to act so inhumane because he is not human. The company sent them into space with an android, a thing they could trust to prioritize the valuable organism over human life. They destroy the robot, and once it's incapacitated, plug its head in to get some answers. And those answers are disappointing. He tells them they cannot kill the life form. It is a perfect organism, whose structural perfection is matched only by its hostility. Ash admires its purity as a survivor. It is unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality. Finally, he lends his sympathies before Ripley pulls the plug. Now they opt for Plan B, take their chances on the escape shuttle, and blow up the Nostromo. Parker and Lambert head off to grab the necessary coolant, while Ripley prepares the shuttle. But minutes later, she and the crew's pet cat Jonesy are the only ones left. The xenomorph finds Parker and Lambert. Ripley hears their mortal screams over the comms and runs to help, but she's too late. They are gone. Now Ripley activates the emergency destruct sequence, giving her 10 minutes to get out. She narrowly evades the monster, grabs Jonesy, gets aboard the shuttle, and takes off as the Nostromo explodes behind her. It's only after she puts Jonesy in cryosleep and prepares to do the same for herself that she realizes they have a guest on board. The xenomorph hid itself among the vessel's wires and tubes. Ripley hides in a closet, quietly puts on a suit, and straps in before opening a doorway. The alien holds on as rapid decompression threatens to force it into the void of space. Ripley fires her grappling hook, knocking it off the ship until it finds its way back. Finally, by activating the thrusters, she pushes the xenomorph away, leaving it to die in that void. At last, Ellen Ripley, sole survivor of the Nostromo, leaves her final report, sets a course toward Earth, and enters cryosleep, hopeful that once she reaches the frontier in 6 weeks, someone will find her and pick her up. But if the very existence of the xenomorph proves anything, it's that this is a cruel world. Ellen Ripley will float for 57 years before she is found. In the meantime, her daughter grows up without a mother. But Amanda Ripley never stops looking. She takes a job with the same company, Weyland, working in the same region where her mom disappeared. And one day, 15 years after she went missing, Amanda gets a shot at some answers. She learns that a commercial vessel recovered the flight recorder unit of the Nostromo and took it to Sevastopol Station. That flight recorder is proprietary material, so Weyland wants it back, and Amanda is invited to join the recovery mission, alongside legal executive Taylor, tasked with figuring out what exactly went wrong on the Nostromo, and Samuels, a synthetic. 2 days later, they take off in the Torrens, but when they reach Sevastopol, they find that it's in trouble. It's taken a lot of damage and no one is answering comms. When they try to board it regardless, floating debris gets in the way and separates Amanda from the others. She gets into the station and finds the place is a mess. People are either dead or running scared, And when people get scared, they get aggressive. They look out for themselves. But Amanda finds one man, Axel, who's been surviving in a small corner of the station for about a week. He's willing to help her find a way back to the Torrens, with the promise he can hitch a ride with them out of here. As they make their way to comms, evading nervous people with guns, he tells her about the monster that's been picking them off one by one. He hasn't seen it himself, but it is out there. And soon, though Amanda barely gets a look at it, that monster kills Axel. Then some good news. Amanda finds the Nostromo flight recorder, and the bad news follows swiftly. The data is corrupted. She learns nothing. Now, Amanda's only concern is survival, especially when that monster gets into the room with her. Perhaps if that data were not corrupted, she would realize that she is facing the same sort of creature her mother faced 15 years ago, the xenomorph. Staying quiet, she avoids the monster while it slaughters every other nearby soul. And soon she discovers another enemy. Struggling to take control of the growing chaos, all the synthetics aboard turn on the humans. It seems the Seegson brand androids on this station are not as loyal to humans as the ones Weyland-Yutani makes, and that's saying something. Though Samuels has been trustworthy so far, Amanda soon finds him with Taylor, who has been wounded, hurt by debris on the way in. So Amanda ventures across the station again in search of medical care. She does find a doctor, but another encounter with the xenomorph gets him killed, and she only narrowly survives. Returning to Samuels, she finds the ship's marshals, Waits and Ricardo, with him. They fill her in on where that monster came from. Henry Marlowe is the captain of the ship which found the Nostromo recorder, but apparently that wasn't the only thing he found, because when he arrived at Sevastopol, he brought that monster with him. The marshals threw him in lockup, but haven't gotten much else out of him. They make their way to the Marshal Bureau, where they have a basic life support unit. While Taylor gets treatment, Amanda tries speaking with Marlowe. He's reluctant to talk until he finds out how personal this is for Amanda Ripley. So he tells her some of his story, how his team came upon the Nostromo flight recorder and followed its flight data in the hopes of finding the ship itself, something that'd be worth a nice payday. That data took them to LV-426, where they found the Juggernaut and the eggs, where a facehugger latched onto Foster, Marlowe's wife. He stops his story there, unwilling to say more unless someone promises to release him from lockup. Amanda refuses, and for now, there are higher priorities. Ricardo has located the xenomorph, and Waits has a plan to get rid of it, by baiting it, then ejecting it into space. Amanda heads to the lab and lures the organism. Once she's there, and once the monster has followed her, Waits betrays Amanda for the greater good. He doesn't give her a chance to come back before launching the lab into space, sending the monster away, and Amanda with it. But moving fast, she manages to suit up and launch herself back to the station. She barely survives, but at least the xenomorph is gone. All that leaves now is an army of killer synthetics, who have suddenly become more aggressive, hunting every human aboard, and the ship has gone into a lockdown quarantine. Amanda kills and dodges her way back to the Bureau, where Ricardo is waiting for her, though Waits is dead, a casualty of the killer androids. For any hope of survival, they need the ship's computer, Apollo, to make the android stand down and lift the lockdown, but it's programmed only to interact with Seegson synthetics. It won't talk to fellow synthetic Samuels, who is of the Weyland-Yutani ilk, so he initiates a dangerous procedure. It gets him killed, but he manages to override the system. With his sacrifice, the ship's computer, Apollo, will now talk to Amanda. She gets to the computer and finally gets some answers. This facility is no longer owned by Seegson. Weyland-Yutani bought it 2 days after Ripley and the others took off, and they sent Special Order 939 to the synthetics aboard, just like the one they gave Mother on the Nostromo. Getting a specimen is the top priority. All other considerations are secondary. Amanda tells Apollo that the creature is no longer on the ship. It can lift the lockdown, but it refuses. There's something going on in the reactor. On her way to investigate, Amanda hears from Ricardo, who shares a recording of Taylor and Marlowe. Apparently, she made a deal with him. She will set him free in exchange for the coordinates of the planetoid where they found the alien, something Weyland-Yutani desperately wants. Reaching the reactor, Amanda finds a nest. All the people the monster took, trapped in strange biomatter. There are eggs, too. It's like an alien farm, and on that farm, there are more xenomorphs. Amanda quietly avoids them and sets off a reactor purge. It destroys the nest and kills most of the hostiles, but some make it out to the rest of the station. There is, however, a silver lining. The reactor purge messed with the ship's systems. For a moment, the lockdown was lifted, and Marlowe managed to communicate with his ship. He called for it. Now it's nearby in a holding position. If Amanda can get to the short-range shuttles, she can reach it. By the time she gets to a shuttle and onto Marlowe's ship, he is there too. Taylor let him out of holding, and they got to one of the shuttles. As Amanda makes her way toward him, he speaks over the intercom. She learns that he's holding Taylor hostage, and she learns the rest of his story, how he brought his wife aboard the Sevastopol, hoping to get her help. But like Orem 30 years ago, or Kane 15, there was no stopping that facehugger. It put something inside Foster. It burst out of her, and that was it. Now Marlowe knows the truth. This thing cannot be beat. The only option is evasion. They must eradicate every trace of it, ensure the human race never comes into contact with it again. Soon, Amanda finds in the computer on Marlowe's ship data from the Nostromo recorder, a personal message from her mother.
This is for my daughter. Hi, Amanda. I'm recording this for you, my sweetheart, and I hope you get to hear it one day. You see, I got into trouble. My ship, there was an accident, sweetheart, and we found an alien creature. It was very dangerous, and the only way we could stop it was to destroy the ship. I'm okay. I'm stuck on this lifeboat, long way out. But we had to destroy the ship. We had to destroy the Nostromo. We just couldn't risk bringing that thing home with us. I needed to protect you. Don't worry. Don't worry about me. I'm sure I'll see you very soon. I love you, sweetheart.
Of course, the truth is they'll never see each other again. Nonetheless, the unwitting lie is as good a closure Amanda Ripley will ever get. Now, Marlowe intends to follow in her mother's footsteps. He's rigged his own ship to explode, turning his reactor into a nuke. It'll be powerful enough to destroy not only his ship, but Sevastopol Station too, eradicating every trace of the organism. He will not let the company have it. While he rants, Taylor takes the opportunity to knock him out with a wrench. Then she works with Amanda to fix the overloaded reactor. Taylor's proximity to it gets her killed, but they were partly successful. The ship will still explode, but the blast has been reduced, so anyone still living at Sevastopol Station will be spared. Amanda escapes Marlowe's ship on her shuttle, but is not yet in the clear. Back at Sevastopol Station, Ricardo shares the bad news. The explosion took out their orbital stabilizers. They're about to fall out of the sky. Their only hope is to connect with the ship Amanda first came here on, the Torrens. Amanda gets to the observatory, finds the Torrens, and manually aligns the dishes to its position. Finally, she makes contact with her crew. She tells them about the deadly alien organism and calls for urgent extraction. But with the station in disarray, there's no way for the Torrens to dock. They'll have to improvise. She prepares for a dangerous journey to her ship, and Ricardo won't be coming with her. thanks to the facehugger that's latched to him. She works on setting up a manual dock, a way to reach the Torrens using the maintenance rig. It might just work. But Amanda doesn't get a chance to find out. She's grabbed by a xenomorph. Her world goes black, and the light returns. Not dead, alive in one of their nests. She rips her way out. She evades aliens and eggs, but the Sevastopol is going down, and the Torrens is going with it, thanks to their manual tether. Amanda gets an EVA suit. She gets outside. She is surrounded by monsters, but does her job regardless, setting off the emergency release bolts. The monsters are flung into space, and she is thrown toward her ship. As the Sevastopol crashes into the planet below, Amanda Ripley makes it onto the Torrens. She heads toward the bridge, toward Captain Verlaine, and finds a xenomorph along the way. It's like Marlowe said, the only way is evasion, but there's nowhere to run. So she opens the airlock, flinging the alien and herself into space. The EVA suit keeps her alive, as she floats aimlessly in the void. Once again, her world goes black. And once again, it returns, illuminated by the beam of a searchlight. 42 years later, Ellen Ripley's escape vessel is discovered. It should have happened 57 years ago, weeks after escaping the Nostromo, but she ended up drifting through the core systems. It's just blind luck that a deep salvage team discovers her. But waking up is about the only good news she gets. Her daughter, the one she promised she'd return home for her 11th birthday, passed away 2 years ago at the age of 66. The panel of executives who grill her about what really happened on the Nostromo doubt her story. They cannot understand why she blew up a $42 million spaceship. The finding of their inquiry is that Warrant Officer E. Ripley, NOC 14472, has acted with questionable judgment and is unfit to hold an ICC license as a commercial flight officer. Stripped of her profession, she can at least hold on to the knowledge that humanity is safe from the alien she blew out of an airlock. But even this silver lining is denied to her because after the inquiry, she learns that Weyland-Yutani has taken it upon themselves to build a colony on LV-426. Over 60 families now share a home with that crashed juggernaut. It's only by the grace of God none have yet been exposed to the thousands of eggs inside it. One day soon, that changes. Weyland-Yutani suddenly loses contact with the colony. It's around then they start taking Ripley's warnings about LV-426 seriously. They gather a team of Marines and send company rep Carter Burke to recruit Ripley as an advisor, the only one who's dealt with the threat they now face. But she escaped hell once before and has no intention of returning to it, even at the promise of a reinstated license. That changes after another night of waking up soaked in sweat. She will join them after all, on the condition they go with a single mission, not to study or bring back the specimen, but to exterminate them. Soon, she joins a group of Marines on the Sulaco, en route to LV-426, and they wake from cryosleep as they make their approach. From the start, things are shaky. Ripley finds out that Bishop is an android. No one told her there'd be a synthetic with them, but this newer model assures it is impossible for him to harm or allow to be harmed a human being. The Marines themselves do not much impress Ripley either. They are overconfident and show little respect for her warnings. But that'll change once they're on the ground. Ripley and Burke join the squad of Marines in a small dropship, which brings them down to LV-426, while the Sulaco waits above them in orbit. They enter the colony, and in the first structure they enter, find clear signs that a battle was fought, and they find holes melted into the metallic floors, corroborating Ripley's warnings of their acid blood. Same in the next structure. It seems they are too late. This colony has already fallen. But soon they find their first living soul, a little girl named Rebecca. She is, of course, scared of these strangers with big guns. Only Ripley is able to give her comfort and earn her trust, enough to learn her preferred nickname, Newt, and enough to learn that her family is dead. mother, father, and brother. What about the rest of the colonists? Every one of them was implanted with a personal data transmitter. Running scans, they finally pinpoint them at the processing station, under the main cooling towers. The team heads that way, while Lieutenant Gorman commands them remotely, watching through cameras with Ripley and Burke at his side. The team does find the colonists, mostly dead, all cocooned in an alien nest. One, still alive, begs to be killed before a fresh xenomorph pops out of her chest. They burn it dead before it can start to grow up, which draws the attention of those that already have. They come out of the walls and ceilings. The team is surrounded and ambushed. Gorman freezes up when he loses contact, so Ripley takes command. She grabs the APC vehicle and heads toward the team, managing to rescue Hicks, Vasquez, and Hudson. The rest are gone. What to do next? Ripley has a suggestion. Get back to orbit and nuke the whole site out of existence. Burke protests. It's a multi-million-dollar installation. He can't authorize that. But this is a military operation. Lieutenant Gorman was knocked out in the chaos, leaving Corporal Hicks in command. He decides they'll go with Ripley's plan. The dropship comes to pick them up, until the xenomorph on board reveals itself. Ripley and the others can only watch it crash, and along with it, their hope of leaving this place. Hudson, in particular, is disappointed.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
The crash also took out their APC, so they salvage what they can and take shelter, along with Bishop. Now, it's all about survival. Once they're declared overdue, someone should come rescue them. That'll take 17 days. Hudson panics. They aren't going to last 17 hours here. Ripley, on the other hand, is calm. She asks for blueprints and starts thinking strategy. The xenomorphs can get to them through the service tunnels into the sub-level. If they repair the right barricades, seal the right doors, and weld plate steel over the ducts, they can limit the hostiles to 2 quarters, which they can cover with a couple of their robot sentry units, powerful devices that scan for enemies and fire automatically when they approach. They get to work and set everything up as planned. Hicks gives Ripley a tracker to wear on her wrist, so he can always find her if needed. She appreciates it. There's a growing respect between them, each seeing in the other that same ability to remain calm and to think, even in the face of mounting danger. Then it's time for bed, something Newt dreads. That's when the nightmares come. Ripley promises to keep her safe, and promises not to leave her. And she gives her that tracker from Hicks, for luck. Now, Ripley heads to the lab to see what Bishop has learned, studying the creatures. Not much. Ripley wonders where all the facehuggers are coming from. Eggs, of course. But who is laying them? They realize there must be a queen. She tells Bishop, when he's done, to destroy all of his samples. But Burke gave orders to bring them home. Facehuggers would be worth millions to the bioweapons division. Ripley confronts Burke. Somehow, the scum of Weyland-Yutani continues to disappoint her. She checked the colony log. After her testimony about the downed alien craft filled with alien eggs, Burke apparently gave the order for colonists to investigate. That's how they all got killed and infected by the xenomorph infestation. Burke got them killed, and now he wants to bring specimens to Earth. She will not allow it, and she will make sure people know this was all his fault. Soon, more bad news. When the dropship crashed, it damaged the atmosphere processor. It's unstable, and in 4 hours it'll blow up, killing them all. They need a way out fast. Ripley and Hicks come up with something. If they repair the hard wiring between here and the colony transmitters, they can call for the other dropship from the Sulaco remotely. Only problem is, someone has to go out there to make the repairs, with all those things running around. Bishop volunteers. Between crawling over there, making the repairs, and flying the dropship remotely, it'll take him close to 4 hours. He gets to work as the xenomorphs approach. The sentry guns fire on them, almost every bullet they have. The surviving creatures retreat. The guns worked, but it's a one-time deal, because now they're out of ammo. Of course, the xenomorphs don't know that, so they'll probably look for another way in. Hudson and Vasquez walk the perimeter. Gorman wakes up, and Ripley, after over 24 hours without sleep, joins Newt in the med lab for some shut-eye, only to wake up to a couple of face-huggers. Ripley moves fast. The door is locked. The glass won't break, so she lights a fire under the sprinkler system, setting off the alarm. A facehugger gets on Ripley and she struggles with it, until Hicks and the other Marines arrive to the rescue. Then Ripley tells them what happened. Burke was behind this. He knew that if Ripley and Newt were impregnated by the aliens, he could put them in cryosleep. Nobody would know what's growing inside them, so he could easily sneak them past ICC quarantine on the return trip home. He'd have his valuable specimens, and Ripley couldn't testify about his failures. Hicks decides Burke's punishment will be execution, but it'll have to wait. The xenomorphs have cut power to the station. The Marines quietly survey their surroundings. The monsters are somehow in the perimeter and approaching fast. They're right on top of them, and they realize that's how they got in. They're in the ceilings above them. It's another ambush. The monsters grab Hudson and drag him underground. Burke makes a break for it and runs right into a xenomorph. The others escape into the air ducts, while Vasquez and Gorman die, protecting them from the coming swarm. Ripley, Hicks, and Newt run until the little girl falls down a shaft, and like Hudson, she is taken. Bishop has made the repairs and brought down the dropship. They have 26 minutes before the atmosphere processor blows, but they are not leaving. Ripley is going to get Newt back, and she'll have to go alone. Hicks is too hurt, burned by the acid blood of a xenomorph he killed, protecting him and Ripley. She grabs weapons, heads into the nest under the processing station, and follows the tracker she gave Newt. She has to kill a facehugger and xenomorph, but gets to the girl. She grabs Newt and finds herself face to face with the Queen. Ripley torches her eggs, riddles her with bullets, and they make a run for it. The Queen comes after them. They barely make it to the surface, and when they do, the Queen is right behind them, somehow having figured out how to work the elevator. It seems all hope is lost, until Bishop comes in on the dropship. Ripley and Newt get on board. They escape, and they get to the Sulaco. Finally convinced that synthetics aren't all bad, Ripley thanks Bishop, just before the Queen rips him in half, having apparently snuck onto their dropship, and now it's here. But once Ripley gets into an exosuit cargo loader, it's a fair fight, and she gives that Queen the usual xenomorph treatment, tossing it into the airlock and launching it into space. Ripley puts the wounded but still breathing Hicks into cryosleep, then does the same for Newt, and finally herself. Time to go home. But this is still a cruel world. Sure, they killed the Queen, but none of them noticed the facehugger on board. It causes an electrical fire, and the ship's computer launches them off the Sulaco. They crash land on Fury 161, one of Weyland-Yutani's backwater work prisons. Ripley is their first female guest in years. Chief Medical Officer Clemens is the one who greets her when she wakes from cryosleep, and he's the one who tells her that she is the ship's sole survivor. Ripley grieves, and she checks for signs of what went wrong. She checks for signs of that dangerous organism. Hicks' body is mangled beyond recognition, and Newt's shows no sign of an alien life form hiding inside her. They hold a funeral, leaving a recently deceased ox unguarded. No one thought to check the animal's cause of death, and no one is there to witness a xenomorph burst out of it. Before the killing starts, Ripley knows a little peace. They called for rescue, and someone should be here in a week to pick her up. In the meantime, Clemens tells her more. How the prisoners here found religion a few years ago. How the company wanted to shut the place down, but the converts insisted on staying. So the 25 of them were allowed to remain as custodians. Ripley and Clemens find themselves trusting each other. They grow close and even become intimate. Then prisoners start dying. No one knows what's doing it, but the burns make it obvious to Ripley. Acid blood. There's a xenomorph on Fury 161. In the prisoner's trash heap, She finds where they threw Bishop's remains and plug him back in for some answers. He reads out data from the ship's recorder and tells her about the facehugger, and he tells her how this data has already been uploaded to Weyland-Yutani. They still want that specimen for their bioweapons division. They know it's here, and they will be coming for it. No one believes Ripley, and the one man who has actually seen the alien has a reputation for mental instability. Regardless, she knows the danger they're in and looks for solutions, but finds none. The prison has no weapons, and there's no way off-planet, except the supply ship that arrives once a month. Soon, Ripley and Clemens have one last quiet moment together before he becomes the xenomorph's latest victim. Ripley should be next, but strangely, it is not hostile toward her. The next victim is Superintendent Andrews, and the other prisoners all witness it. There is no longer any doubt about what they're dealing with. Suddenly, they're willing to hear Ripley out. She asks some questions about the facility and hatches a plan. They have a room built for nuclear waste that never got used. If they can lure the xenomorph there, they could lock it in. As always, Ripley's weapon of choice to drive the monster is fire. When the xenomorph attacks unexpectedly, triggering an early explosion, some of the convicts die. But ultimately, they do drive it in the right direction, and they do trap it in that room. But one prisoner, the unstable one who first witnessed the xenomorph, he has to see it again. He kills the man guarding the room where it's trapped. He opens the door and does get a look at the beast. It's the last thing he sees. Now they're back to square one, and there's a matter Ripley has kept to herself so far. She hasn't been feeling well. She gets in the neuroscanner and finally sees what's growing inside her. A facehugger must have gotten to her in the stasis pod, and now she carries inside her the next queen. That's why the xenomorph let her go. It knows that she is its future. Ripley tells the prisoner's spiritual leader, Dylan, the stakes. If that thing gets out of her, it'll make eggs. It'll unleash thousands more facehuggers. It'll spread, and it'll wipe out everything. So she makes a deal. While it's in her, she can get close to the xenomorph. She will use that to help them kill it. All she asks in return is that when it's done, Dylan kills her too. That will be the best way to ensure the queen is never born, and for Ripley's life, that's a fair trade. The prisoners gather to devise a new plan to kill the xenomorph. Some are unwilling to fight. They'd rather wait for the company to send rescue, but Ripley clues them in on a nasty truth. They are not sending rescue for them. They are sending rescue for it. They've wanted that specimen for their bioweapons division for years, and Dylan reminds them of another truth. They're all gonna die one day, but they can choose how. Dylan has chosen to go out fighting. The rest of them follow. The plan is simple. They will be the bait. They will lure the monster to the mold and drown it in hot lead. More of them die in the process, some by accident, some by sacrifice, including Dylan, but in the end, they do kill it. Now, all that's left is Ellen Ripley herself. But Weyland-Yutani has something to say about that, and they're already here. When Ripley put herself in the neuroscanner, the data was uploaded, and they expedited their trip. She's met by a man with Bishop's face. Not an android, but the human who designed the android in his own image. The company sent him to show Ripley a friendly face, hoping it would make her more amenable. He tells Ripley to come with them. They have all the equipment they need right here to take that monster out of her. She can live. But Ripley knows damn well what'll happen after that. They won't kill it. They'll study it. They'll weaponize it. And whether they mean to or not, they will unleash hell. The choice they offer is no choice at all. Ripley leaps into the furnace. She dies and takes the xenomorph queen with her. That's where Ellen Ripley's story should end, and for a couple of centuries it seems like it has, until someone in the US military gets an idea how to bring her back. More specifically, how to bring back the thing that was growing inside her, the Xenomorph Queen. Using technology of the 24th century and blood samples taken from Ripley on Fury 161, they clone her, but she is not the old Ripley. By the time that blood sample was taken, the alien's DNA had already intermingled with her own. Good news for the scientists. That means they did not just resurrect a human, but also, just as they'd hoped, the alien queen inside her. And that is not the only thing which makes this Ripley special. After they surgically remove the queen, there is still some xenomorph in her. She has their strength, agility, and acid blood. Her mind is different too. She feels connected to them, like they are her family, and she has memories of her old life. It seems the aliens pass on their memories genetically, and now she does too. The scientists, with a queen in their possession, soon have eggs too, and if they want more xenomorphs, they'll need human hosts for incubation. That's where the mercenaries come in, hired to steal stasis pods with people still in them. The scientists put eggs in front of the sleeping, unwitting test subjects. Facehuggers plant embryos inside them, and soon the scientists have themselves over a dozen xenomorphs. But among those mercenaries is a girl named Call. She harbors two secrets. One, she is a second-generation synthetic, the kind made not by people, but by other androids. Two, she did not join these mercenaries for money. She did it because she knew what the scientists were up to and wanted to stop it. When the government found out about second-generation synthetics, they recalled them. But some, like Call, made it out. Before the recall, she accessed the mainframe and found every dirty little covert op the government ever dreamed of, including this one. She knew that if they succeeded in resurrecting xenomorphs, it would be the end of humanity, a species she is programmed to care about. However, by the time she gets to Ripley, it's far too late. The scientists already have their xenomorphs, and after that, it doesn't take long for things to go wrong. One of their xenomorphs figures out how to escape by slaughtering their cellmate and letting the acid blood melt them a makeshift exit. Just like that, the United Systems military vessel Auriga becomes a slaughterhouse. The mercenaries aren't sure Ripley's allegiance. She looks human, but Call knows there's alien inside her. Nonetheless, she's useful. They team up, and they join Dr. Wren, one of the few survivors still on the ship. He clues them in on something. When the Auriga registers an emergency, it automatically sets a course for home base, Earth, which means these monsters will be unleashed there unless they can stop it. Their plan is to escape on the Betty and blow up the Auriga. As they make their way, they pass by a lab which explains the 8 tattooed on Ripley's arm. She was not the first attempt at a clone. There were 7 before her. 7 failures, genetic monstrosities. The only one still breathing begs for Ripley to kill her. And she does. She burns the whole room and every twisted creation in it. Soon they also find another survivor, Purvis, one of the poor bystanders who was kidnapped in cryosleep, and he already has a xenomorph growing inside him. Ripley can smell it. But there is hope. If they can get him to the Betty in time, they can freeze him again, and only wake him once they're home and have the surgical tools to take it out of him. The remaining journey is treacherous, getting several of the mercs killed. Call takes a close-range bullet when Dr. Wren betrays them, locking them behind a door and running off on his own. When Call brushes off the bullet wound and gets the door open, her true nature as a robot is revealed. She hates herself for it. She's disgusting. But someone else who isn't quite human either, Ripley, tells her to get over it. She does, and she taps into the ship's mainframe. She gives an order so that when it reaches Earth, it won't land. It'll crash, hopefully destroying it and eradicating the xenomorphs. Finally, they make their way to the Betty, but Ripley is captured by the xenomorphs along the way, though it's unclear if she's an unwilling captive or if she's glad to be with her own kind. On the Betty, they find Dr. Wren. He does not want his work to end. He holds Call at gunpoint, demanding they abort the collision. It's around then Purvis feels a monster trying to crack open his ribcage from the inside. He's gonna die, but he won't waste it. He grabs Dr. Wren and holds him close, so when the xenomorph comes out, it doesn't just kill Purvis, but takes Wren with him. With the doctor gone, the rest of the crew shoots the infant alien dead. As for Ripley, she has a reunion with her daughter, the alien queen, and learns that in the genetic crossing, it wasn't just the xenomorph who passed some traits to Ripley, but Ripley also passed at least one to the queen. A human reproductive system. Yes, she has laid eggs, but now she also has something gestating inside her womb, and Ripley soon witnesses its birth. A bizarre hybrid, a xenomorph with human eyes. It screeches, a sound at once alien but also human, like a crying infant. It turns on the queen, killing her, and instead looks to Ripley, as though recognizing her as its closer kin. Nearby, there is also a scientist cocooned in the nest. He is in awe of this beautiful genetic hybrid. He calls for it. The child answers his call by slaughtering him. Ripley uses the distraction to escape onto the Betty, and they leave the Auriga, but the child would not be left behind and has followed her here. It kills DeStefano, a USM soldier who escaped with them, and nearly kills Call, but the hybrid child inherently trusts Ripley. She uses that against it, to get close, and to use her own acid blood to melt a hole in the wall. Depressurization pulls the hybrid against it. Its insides are ripped out and launched into space. It screams an almost human scream. Ripley can only say she's sorry before the screaming finally stops, and the thing is finally gone. The Auriga crashes to Earth, while the Betty lands safely. Call, an android built in space, and Ripley 8, a clone with genetically inherited memories, step out onto the ruined planet where they are both strangers, and they wonder what to do next. As for me, what am I doing next? Well, I'll be watching Alien Romulus, and if you're wondering where that goes on the timeline, it takes place in 2142, placing it 20 years after Alien and 5 years after Isolation. So Ripley is alive at this time, but still floating in stasis. Aliens hasn't happened yet. Stay tuned, Romulus will get added to this timeline at some point, and I may do a review along with more Alien content. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next One Take.